Today's recipe calls for candy canes. I'm going to show you how to make the best Christmas cookies out there, also known as double chocolate chip peppermint cookies. They're super simple, but really delicious. So with that said, let's get started.
The first thing we need to do is preheat our oven to 350 Fahrenheit or 176 degrees Celsius. Next, we need to make some brown butter for the cookies. Grab a small saucepan for this job. This step is totally optional and you can use regular butter for this, but the brown butter will bring so much more flavor to our cookies. When making brown butter, we need to use a little bit more than what the recipe calls for. We'll lose a small amount of volume during the browning process because the water will be cooked off, so you need to use 19 tablespoons or 286 grams worth of unsalted butter. To make it brown faster, it helps if you cut it into smaller pieces. Once everything is in the saucepan, gently toss it on your device that melts things. Crank the heat up to a low level of heatness. This process should take about 7 to 8 minutes or until it becomes a nice golden brown color and becomes super aromatic and delicious smelling. Once you see a ton of little golden brown nuggets on the bottom of the pan, you know it's done. The nuggets are all the milk solids that have been toasted. Now that you've made a golden liquid, you need to measure out 1 cup or 250 mils. It's imperative that you measure out the melted butter to ensure we aren't going to use too much or come up short. Baking is a science, so things need to be just right. When measuring out the butter, it's important that you get all of those little golden brown nuggets. We worked hard for those things. Take out or add butter as needed to get the correct amount. Once measured out, transfer it to a holding device so we can throw it in the fridge to harden. A huge pro tip, or what you need to do, is if you decide to use brown butter, is to make it the day before making the cookies. It'll make things way easier for you. These are the golden brown nuggets that I was talking about. This is what it should look like once it's changed from a liquid back to a solid. Man, science. Or the power of a fridge, who knows. The next thing we need to do is bust up some candy canes. We need enough crushed candy canes to make half a cup or 78 grams worth. Should be roughly 6 regular sized candy canes. Before crushing them, cover them with parchment paper or put them in a bag. Use your favorite smashing device of choice. I find using a pan works great. You want to do your best to keep them in decent sized pieces. These will be used to decorate the cookies. Next, grab a medium sized holding device they call a bowl and also a fine mesh strainer. We're going to be bringing all of our dry goods together. The first thing we'll add to the bowl is 2.5 cups or 300 grams of all-purpose flour. Next is 3/4 cup or 75 grams of unsweetened cocoa powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of sea salt, 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Lastly, 1 teaspoon of instant espresso powder, which is totally optional, but this will help intensify the chocolate flavor. Sift everything together and push through any clumps that are left behind in your strainer. Next, lightly whisk your face off to combine all the dry goods into one dusty mess. To the bowl of a stand mixer with a paddle attachment or a large bowl with a hand mixer, you'll add 1 cup or 226 grams of room temperature whether unsalted butter, or in my case, the room temp brown butter that we made the day before. Now that the butter is in the bowl, give it a quick mix to help break it up. After the butter has been broken up, we'll start adding our cavity creators, also known as sugar. First, you'll add 1 cup or 200 grams of granulated sugar. Next, add 1 cup or 200 grams of dark brown sugar. Cream the butter and sugar together on medium-high for 2 to 3 minutes or until it becomes light and fluffy in texture. Throughout this entire process, occasionally give your bowl a scrape down. This also includes the bottom of the bowl. This will help ensure everything gets well mixed together. Now that we have a sugary butter, we'll add 2 whole large room temp eggs. Add them one at a time. After adding them to the bowl, mix them in really well. It's best practice to crack them in a separate container. This way you're not adding any calcium to the cookies. After the eggs have been mixed in, we'll add our flavor additives. First, we'll add 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Next is 1 teaspoon of peppermint extract. Once those are in there, give it a good mix up. Now that the wet ingredients have become one, we'll start adding all of the dry into our wet. When adding the dry mixture in, I like to do it in 2 sets. Add the first half and give it a decent mix in, and then give your bowl a scrape down. After you've done that, add the last half, mix until you can't see any more flour. It's imperative that you don't overmix the cookie dough. Doing so will will create gluten, which in turn will give us a tougher cookie. Now that you can't see any more of the flour mixture, we can add the last bit of the goodies. First, you'll add 1 cup or 180 grams of semi-sweet chocolate chips and give them a quick mix in. The last thing we'll add is 1 cup or 180 grams of peppermint crunch chips. Mix those in till just combined. You can finish mixing things up by hand if needed. Grab and prep a half sheet tray, line it with a silicone mat or with some parchment paper. It's time to portion out the cookie dough. You can use whatever method that works best for you, a scoop or a scale. The size of cookie we're shooting for is a tablespoon sized dough ball. I think the scale is the best way to go. If you do decide to weigh things out, the dough ball should weigh 1 ounce or 29 grams. After you've created the ball of goodness, dip one side of it into the crushed candy cane. It's important that you only do one side of the dough ball. If you try to do the whole thing, you'll end up with a gooey mess. I found if the dough slightly dries and forms a small crust on it, it's harder for the candy canes to stick to it, so do your best to keep it covered or hire someone to help you make them a lot faster. When placing your cookies on the sheet tray, leave about 2 inches in between them to account for them spreading while they bake. Now that you have your half sheet lined with cookie dough balls, to be extra, you can add some flaky sea salt atop of them. Once ready, we can throw them in our hot oven box on the middle rack for the best results. We'll bake the cookies for 10 minutes or until they've set, but the center is still nice and soft. You may need to bake them longer or shorter, depending on how hot your oven runs. When the buzzer goes off, we'll check them and pull our cookies out of the oven box. While the cookies are still nice and hot, we'll add a small pinch of the crushed up candy canes. This will add texture and a sweet aesthetic look. Let them cool on the tray for 3 to 4 minutes and then transfer them over to a wire rack to completely cool down. Repeat the same process until you've baked off all the cookie dough. You can plate these things up, you could share, or you can eat them while they're still warm. Whatever you decide to do, just enjoy.
Alright, now that our cookies are done, let's give them the old taste-a-roo. So looking at them, they came out nice and aesthetically pleasing. They're nice and small, but yet they're plump like that fatty they call Santa. They look super soft, and the melted candy cane on top gives it this cool aesthetic look. And they have those sweet Christmas colors, and they look super soft as well. So let's crack it open. Dang! Those are still soft. The inside looks good, and if you squint hard enough, you can see the chocolate chips in there, and you can see some of those Andes peppermint chips in there as well. So yeah, let's give it a shot. Our cookies came out super tasty. They're nice and rich and chocolatey, but then that extra salt we added on top and the salt inside the cookie themselves helps cut through all that richness of the chocolate and the sweetness as well, and helps counterbalance that brown butter as well. We get a little hint of vanilla flavor as well, but then that peppermint candies and the peppermint chunks bring a ton of freshness and that sweet, delicious peppermint flavor as well. Then we get a little bit of richness from that brown butter as well in there. Texture-wise, they're super soft in the center, and the outside is slightly crunchy, so you get the best of both worlds. Then the melted candy cane on top brings a little bit of gooiness, and then that hard candy cane on top also brings a little crunch factor as well. Overall, these things are just banging. These cookies are super simple to make and make for the perfect cookie for any cookie party out there. And they're also just perfect to have during the holiday season to make you feel all warm inside. And if you're not a huge fan of the peppermint candy canes, you can swap those things out and use your favorite flavor of candy cane. So hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. And I've eaten quite a few of these things, so I wonder how long my breath is going to be all minty and fresh. We'll see, I guess. But we'll see you on the next one. Our cookies, our cookie. Ah.